I've been playing Super Smash Bros. For a long time at this point, and if there's one thing I've learned is that for every single character in the game, whether we're talking about what might be the single most devastatingly lethal character in the series history, or a humble low tier just trying to make their way through the world, someone out there's gonna have a problem with them and want them toned down somehow. Yeah, we're not doing any of that today. Choose the character you hate the most. Like Min Min's arms, buffs are coming, and there's no escape. As with the nerfing every character video from a few weeks ago, I'm not allowed to actually replace any moves here. These all need to be changes you could reasonably expect to see in a balance patch. And an additional ground rule for this one, I'm not allowed to change any hitboxes or hurtboxes because, look, believe me, nobody hates Smash's janky hitboxes more than I do. The real fun of a video like this is discussing character design, so if I want to go around fixing every Pit Nair hitbox or weird Mewtwo tail hurtbox, I can probably find something like that on most characters, and that's not really saying much about their actual design and the directions I'd like to take them. It's just trying to fix Smash jank. I'm also generally trying to avoid just changing things back to how they worked in an earlier Smash game, although I'm not making that a hard rule. There are a few characters where I think that makes a lot of sense. This video is sponsored by Skillshare, the online learning community that lets anyone explore their creativity and learn new skills with thousands of inspiring courses. I've talked about Skillshare's video editing and YouTube navigation courses in the past, obviously things very important to my job, but one of my hobbies is music. I've always wanted to try my hand at video game music though, something I was completely in the dark about, so this was the perfect chance to take two courses, Slapback Sounds, The Ultimate Guide to Video Game Music, and Jordan Frazier's Creating 8-Bit Music for Video Games, and using tips from those courses I was able to compose the music you're listening to right now. There's work to do, but I think for a first attempt it's pretty decent. If you want to learn more about video game music too, or photography, cooking, style, coding, there's something for you on Skillshare right now. Probably several somethings, and even on top of this, they're constantly adding brand new courses as well. If you'd like to see this for yourself, all you've got to do is click my link in the description and pinned comment of this video. The first 1,000 people to do so will get a 30-day free trial to explore Skillshare for themselves, so there's never been a better time to check them out. Happy learning, and thank you to Skillshare for supporting the channel. Alright, I think we can probably all agree that Mario's close quarters combo game doesn't really need any help here. This kind of stuff, yeah, once he gets his hands on you, he's good. The main issue with him is getting his hands on you. He's a very stubby character, he can struggle a little bit in the mid-range, so there are a couple of ways you could patch that up. You could buff his fireballs for sure, you could maybe make them faster, maybe make them come out a bit quicker. This would make them function more like they do in the actual Mario games too. Buffing their speed would actually be a trade-off though, because a lot of the time you want to be able to follow along with the fireballs, and a lot of the other changes I can think of, you know, maybe making them come out faster or be less laggy or do more damage and therefore have more hits done. Those are fine, but I kind of like the concept of Mario being balanced around the fact that he does struggle to get in. Fireballs are already one of the most underrated projectiles in the game in my opinion, and I think making them just absurdly good is a little bit of a cop-out solution to that, so I would personally choose the much more interesting projectile in my opinion is Flood. I decrease the time it takes for Flood to get to full charge a bit because it's one of the most interesting and skill testing moves I think Mario mains have, and using it smartly to put your opponent into a precarious position which can lead to a big Mario combo through disadvantage I find way more interesting than just going, yeah, I'm gonna spam fireballs more. For DK, I would like to improve his survivability off stage a bit. That's an issue I think that a lot of Ultimate Heavyweights have. In my opinion, they should be very hard to kill, but I think if you were gonna do that, I'd want to see a bit more of an extensive rework. I wouldn't want to just say like, oh, make the spinning Kong go way higher, because the thing is, it's an homage to Dixie Kong, and it's already actually pushing past the physics of her move. I wouldn't want to push it too much further. So what I would actually do instead is reduce the end leg on his jab too, so that it combos. It looks like it should in my opinion. This seems like a very launcher kind of pose, and right now this move is frame 5 and it doesn't kill, not even close, and it's very stubby by the standards of DK's moves, so there's really not much of a reason at all for it to be here. It's just one of those obligatory tacked on moves, and getting rid of most characters' jab utility is one of my least favorite changes they made overall in Ultimate, so I would like to see it back here. Out of the 3 links, he gets by far the least use of his bow and arrow in neutral. It's a good off stage and edge guarding kind of move, but still seems kind of underwhelming considering just how vital it is in essentially every Zelda game where it appears. You know, he gets absolutely nothing off of it, no combos of any kind, not even really any good setup stuff, but I can't appreciate that that role's already been taken by other links, so okay, fair enough, we can differentiate them there. This is the power arrow, but if we're going to take that approach, I'd like to make it way more powerful with this thing, the double bow shot. Now this, I would like to massively increase the damage and knockback on it so that at low percents, it led reliably into combos, and at high percents, this killed without needing to charge it. Which at first glance may seem like overkill because, oh, this is really not that committal in action and it covers a huge hitbox and is not that unsafe, all that good stuff. Yeah, sure, but the setup time for it is actually very substantial. You gotta pick it up off stage, or you gotta shoot it into the side of the stage and pick it up as you're getting back on or something like that. So it's really very, very limited how often you're gonna have access to this. And right now, who cares, because it doesn't do anything. Link got some nice additions coming into Ultimate. You know, you got the new grab that's not the tether grab, he's got the new bomb, that's all good stuff, but one of the changes they highlighted was this thing, being able to pick up and use 2 arrows at once, which is a cool homage to Breath of the Wild. It's an homage to a class of bow, but you just never ever see Link players go for this in practice because there's no reason to, so I'd like to see that incentivized a lot more. And if Link players are going to have the arrow in their hand more often, you can maybe expect to see this kind of stuff more often too, which is nice. That's a unique thing that Link can do. A simple number-based change that could actually have a pretty significant impact on his playstyle. I really want to see Samus use her missiles more. In the Metroid series, they're one of her single most important abilities, and in most Smash games, they've been very underwhelming. I'm not the world's biggest fan of the stalling properties they gave the super missiles here. I get why they did that, you know, it makes it a better combo tool, and you can use it to approach in neutral better. They just don't do a great job making it feel like you're playing a Metroid game. They're so deviated from, again, a very iconic ability in the Metroid series, but I still think they're the more interesting one than this thing. The homing missile, that's a way lower skilled option. I wouldn't like that to necessarily be super strong. I can't just get rid of the stalling property for the super missiles, and I can't decrease it because that would actually arguably be a nerf because you can't run behind them as effectively. And if I increased it, that would make it feel even less faithful to Metroid and would present some other potential nerfs in other areas as well. This is not supposed to be a trade-off video, this is a buffs video. So I would say make it come out faster so that Samus has more opportunities to weave this into her game plan, because the thing is, her zoning can be very annoying. And while this is zoning, it's zoning with the purpose of being able to get in on your opponent more. So it's one of the less toxic aspects of her zoner design. And I just really want to see Samus actually using missiles properly, so do what you can. Dark Samus has the super missiles as well, but I do try and differentiate my choices between the clone characters because I think making them more different from each other is always a good thing. One of the more distinct animation changes between Samus and Dark Samus is the dash attack, and it's actually pretty appropriate for the Metroid series because in Metroid Prime, Dark Samus does spend a lot of time charging at Samus. And again, it's going against the sometimes frustrating ultra zonery nature of current Samus and Dark Samus, so I would increase, or decrease rather, the startup time on that so that it came out quicker. Yoshi's Egg Roll is an absolute joke of a move and has been for a very long time at this point, one of the absolute worst moves in Smash history consistently. These are the kind of moves that can get degenerate very quickly, so I wouldn't want to make it insanely good, but as is, it basically has no reason to exist at all. It's like a vestigial organ. So the main change I would make would be to radically increase its horizontal velocity. That solves a few issues for me. It means that you can actually use it as somewhat of a mix-up and disadvantage because as of right now, look, he goes nowhere. I think Yoshi's just default air movement is actually faster than his quote-unquote burst movement tool. I'm like 99% sure that's the case. And another big issue that it solves, this bounce when he first hits the ground and then he's allowed to start moving, that bounce would also go a lot farther. There are so many changes I could suggest for Kirby. Decreasing the landing leg on Dan Air so it actually starts combos. It feels unintuitive that it doesn't. A lot of other drag down moves can. And it's perfectly balanced by the fact that it's so slow to start up. Look at this, if you get hit by that in neutral, you had it coming. And also, on top of that, is also a very iconic move, so I'd really like to see that buffed. I also think that apart from arguably Stone, every single one of his special moves should be buffed significantly. Hammer, that is one of the most iconic, powerful copy abilities in the Kirby series, and yet in Smash, it's a complete joke. Why is Final Cutter so slow? Why does it give Kirby such a bad recovery and have the limited use of the projectile and is a very bad out of shield option? There's no call for that. But the single biggest crime I think that Kirby commits is that at higher levels of play, you very rarely ever see people go for the command grab because it's just too risky. I want Inhale to be one of the most used command grabs, not one of the least used. Look at this. I'm trying to shield as early as I can here. That's just not good. I think part of the reason it's balanced like this is likely to avoid some of the offstage infamous Inhale cheese in more casual settings, which is a fair consideration. There's no way to completely get around that, but I think something that doesn't affect it too much and also makes a huge change to the move's actual viability is to significantly decrease the ending lag on it. Because this kind of thing, you know, you've already gone past the ledge, you're gonna have to make your way back without invincibility regardless, so compare that to, say, decreasing the startup so the move comes out way faster. That's gonna catch way more people, but trying to use this in neutral is just so risky, and I think that's one of the main reasons you don't see Kirby players go for it more. For Fox, I'm gonna maybe push the envelope a little bit on the something you could expect to see in a balance patch point, but I don't think it's completely out of the picture. I'd like to see him be able to jump cancel out a shine. Yeah, in Melee that's obviously a ridiculously powerful ability, but this is not Melee. The use cases would be substantially worse. That's not to say they wouldn't exist. You know, maybe you could get that into a neutral air, but it's not even really that different than just throwing out the neutral air to begin with. It just moves your opponent a little further to the side of the screen and builds up a bit more damage. That seems pretty reasonable, especially for a character that usually kills off the top anyways. And for more offstage based stuff, you know, you could do stuff like this and immediately be prepared for a forward air, for example, way faster. If you wanted to rein things in a little bit more, you could even say just jump cancelable on hit. That seems pretty fair. Projectiles interact with reflectors like that sometimes. I'm glad they gave it back some niche applications in Ultimate compared to Smash 4 that somewhat resemble Melee Shine, and I don't want to compare too much to Melee, but the move is incredibly iconic and incredibly cool, and you do see it used as a proper reflector in Ultimate a decent amount, so it's not like the move does nothing, but I'd like to see it do a bit more. As good as Pikachu is and as many strengths as Pikachu has, I do think it's a little bit weird that he has a frame 7 grab when the faster grabs are frame 6. Yes, the things Pikachu can get out of a grab are obscene, so from a balance perspective, I do totally understand why that's a thing, but it's also balanced out by being a stubby grab, and Pikachu's defined by being a very fast character, so it just seems a little nonsensical to me. Now, right now Pikachu's up tilt and his grab are both the same frame 7, and those are his two main loop enablers, so by increasing the maximum speed on those, you are likely going to be opening some new stuff up, which is obviously a little bit risky, but up tilt is by far the more prominent enabler, and you often use it on opponents who are still in the air during the drag down, so I don't think it would be too bad. Luigi's pretty much all about a big dumb grab and big dumb combos. That's essentially what the character has, so I don't really want to give him anything that affects either of those. So what I would actually do is decrease the ending lag of this thing here is forward smash. It's a spear hand strike, which are supposed to be, you know, relatively quick, non-committal kinds of moves, so making it safer on shield and easier to throw out in neutral, that would make logistical sense just from the animation more, and it also means that you're giving Luigi another close quarters tool that doesn't have anything to do with a combo game or a grab game, which is something I feel like he's kind of lacking right now. He's got down tilt as an incredibly good close quarters tool, but that's a combo move. And then forward tilt, for example, is not very good, so I think there's definitely room in his kit for something like this. For Ness, they did good with PK Flash in Ultimate compared to the previous games. This is by far the best it's ever been. They increased the speed of the uncharged version enough so you can actually get a little bit of stuff off of it. I would actually go all the way with it though. This is a cool move. I would increase its speed even a little bit more and let Ness act out of it a little bit earlier so that he could actually use it as a bona fide anti-air callout or combo extender. I thought about doing something for the charged version. You know, it's really bad, but I think it's okay for it to be bad, honestly. Even if you did make it a lot faster, it's still competing with other stuff in Ness's kit, so he's already got one risk-free edgeguard move. Does he really need another one? No, I wouldn't say so. If PK Flash has one really genuinely good use case and then another kind of stunt extra move you use to style on people a little bit because there's no practical reason to go for it, I think that's healthy. One of the most infamous problems with Captain Falcon is his turnaround animation. It makes his foot stick out in a way that just doesn't happen for other characters, and this results in some really stupid hits that shouldn't really be happening. Yes, that is really dumb, and because it would be an animation change rather than just a hitbox or hurtbox change, it would technically be eligible for the list. You know, animation changes aren't really something you see a whole lot of in balance patches apart from speed updates, but there have been a few. There is a case to be made against it though, because Captain Falcon in Ultimate, for better or worse, has been defined as much more of a just run at them bruiser kind of character. Kind of sticks out like a sore thumb that his dash dance is this bad. That seems like an intentional design decision. They don't want Captain Falcon to be just this like fleet-footed running back and forth out of your range kind of guy. They want him to commit. He's been one of the most patched characters, and the majority of changes have been much more around that get in there kind of philosophy. And even outside of that, something that I think affects his viability way more is actually, weirdly enough, his lack of kill power. I know that sounds strange. Falcon is defined by his incredibly flashy, explosive early damage kills, but if he doesn't get those, it can be a real struggle. More and more of the things I've seen with Captain Falcon have just been like, okay, he gets this big explosive combo and gets like 6 up airs out of it. Then his opponent lives to like 170 plus because that kind of was Captain Falcon's opportunity. If he doesn't finish the job off there, his options start to become kind of limited. So even though the turnaround animation is dumb and I'd like to see it changed, I think what would actually practically help him a lot more is just a simple increase to the knockback that his forward tilt does. And I'm talking about a substantial increase. Because I think a nice, just simple, quick, grounded poke that he can run up and throw out and kill you with once he's gotten outside of those windows would tie his kit together so much. Yes, he does have down tilt, but that's much slower and more committal. In practice, it tends to be kind of a niche option you mostly see at the ledge. Yes, there is some tech chase stuff you can get out of it, so you could argue that it's more of a trade-off than a buff, but even then, it's mostly just moving the percents around. He's not the first character by any means to have what's called Marthritis in the Smash world, meaning that if you miss your kill confirm window, it can suddenly become much more difficult to get a kill, but I don't think it's an especially fitting direction for Captain Falcon, especially where they took him in Ultimate. He's a bit of a glass cannon design, he's got the same vulnerabilities that he's always had, but he's lacking a bit of the cannon aspect right now sometimes. It seems excessive. And I am advocating for multiples of Captain Falcon's tilts to work more similarly to each other, and I usually am more of an advocate for diversity in movesets, so Definitely some factors working against this one, especially when there are other things on his kit that are very noticeably in need of fixing. But even with all of that, I just think it would do so much good for him and it would fit him really well. Jigglypuff and Yoshi are kind of kindred spirits with their burst movement tools. Now, Rollout is certainly the better of the two, don't get me wrong, but it's still kind of one of these what the hell is this doing here kind of moves. What I would say is if you hit an opponent or the side of the stage with it, you don't go into this unrecoverable tumble animation anymore that just insta-kills you for no reason. It would give it at least the vaguest hint of being a useful recovery tool, something that really is just too risky to justify a lot of the time right now, and it plays into Puff's air game, which is fair, because the idea that she's supposed to be just an entirely aerial-based character, and yet she has a move that compromises her in the air like this makes no sense to me. Yes, the original intent was for it to be a joke move on a joke character, but the joke is run out. I'd like Peach and Daisy to be radically different characters from each other. Can't really accomplish that. For Daisy, I would increase her ground speed. I want her to feel sportier and more athletic, and the air is very much Peach's kind of domain. In a perfect world, Daisy wouldn't have the float at all. For Peach, I can't really just say increase her air speed in the same way because that has a massive impact on her combo game, which is already insane enough. I think that might break it. So I think one that makes a decent amount of sense is increasing the speed on Peach's forward air. Now that its power has been brought down compared to its peak, I think that's reasonable to do, and Peach is the more air-focused character, and she's the more princessy character, so I think having her crown attack, which in case you didn't know, yes, this is an attack with her crown that she does. Conceptually, I think it works on a few different levels. My original choice for Bowser was dash attack, because this is one of those moves that you don't really see used a whole lot. It can occasionally catch a landing at the very tip of his reach, sure, but when you've got stuff like run up forward tilt, it just seems so redundant. The thing is though, with the animation, it's kind of hard to do a lot with. It feels like it should be fairly lumbering and slow. Yes, that matches Bowser, so you can't really make it a combo move. It doesn't really look like it should be a kill move, and again, it's not really the kind of thing that Bowser needs by any means. Bowser has his flaws, but kill power is not one of them, so I'm kind of stuck here. So I'd much rather address one of those weaknesses, and similar to DK, as I mentioned earlier, one of Bowser's major weaknesses is his recovery. It does have some mix-ups with it. You know, you can go very little distance or a fair amount more depending on how you decide to mash, but it's not very responsive and you're more or less locked into just a few different paths. I would change it so that this is way more responsive, so that if you stop mashing, Bowser starts plummeting, and if you mash, he rises much quicker. I mean, in offstage scenarios, you can disguise your timing and intentions a lot better than you can right now, because Bowser's a character that I think should be pretty difficult to kill. For the ice climbers, just improve the behavior of the AI climber when they're separated. I can't tell you too much about exactly what that means, and you know, I wouldn't necessarily get caught in the weeds too much even if I could, but it's generally agreed to be a pretty big issue with their viability, and I don't love the idea of a player getting punished for something outside their control. They're the smartest they've ever been in a Smash game, but I think they could still be better. For Sheik, I'd increase the safety of her forward tilt on shield. She has a very good neutral overall in Ultimate, but it's mostly based around her projectile, or especially just spamming as many aerials as you can. For a character who's supposed to be so speedy and combo-centric, I think it's a little bit weird that her ground neutral is so weak. Yeah, it's a good move. If it connects, it can do a lot, but it's not like an outrageously good move. Sheik's damage output does not mean that landing a lot of hits with her is particularly unfair, and while you could argue that maybe the developers want her ground neutral to be a bit more precise with stuff like tip or down tilt, where you hit them with the forward tilt is still actually going to make a big difference to the follow-ups you can get, so I think even that principle is not really violated. Sheik overall is an extremely high precision character and does some very cool stuff when it's mastered, but I would still say maybe her precision is slightly too high right now, so having one ground move where you can just go, yeah, I'm just going to throw this out and see what happens, I think that's reasonable. Zelda's up tilt's actually one of my favorite moves of hers and one that's always stood out to me. It's handled pretty well, you know, it's not too laggy, and it's got some combo potential for sure. Look at this. That's nice. I like that at earlier percents. Later on, at this point it starts falling off hard and doesn't become an especially good move. The reverse hit of up tilt, that does have a little bit of a band where it combos into up air, but this is inconsistent with the early hit, for example, and then at later percents the early hit still doesn't combo, and the back hit sends them too high. So if you want to just say I can't spam this big circle and get constant kill confirms into up air, fine, but I would say bring the knockback growth of the rear hit down a fair amount so that you can do it consistently. Plays decently well into Zelda's overall direction of I need a little bit of setup, but if I connect it, there's big payoff. I know that Dr. Mario is the slower and stronger Mario clone, and I also know that he has an extra recovery move with down special, but I still don't really think there's a justifiable reason for up special to go as little distance as it does. I don't think his recovery needs to be that bad. His slowness and the reduced combo potential he has compared to basic Mario, I think is more than enough of a balancing factor to make up for his additional power. I think it's totally unnecessary to make his recovery as weak as it is. It's one of the worst in the game right now, and his up special, even as a better recovery move, still would not be strictly better than Mario. Yes, this thing here is very good, but it's also got a sour spot, and the sour spot is pathetic, which would be a huge blow for Mario because he uses the upper region of the super jump punch a lot to finish off his combos. So I'm not necessarily going to say you need to make this as high as Mario's, but I think making making it higher would certainly be warranted. The notion of making characters busted on stage but balancing them out with a bad recovery is something that I think Ultimate leans on too much, and he's not even busted on stage. Pichu, the charged Skull Bash is very powerful, but the uncharged Skull Bash is kind of pathetic, honestly, which I don't think makes a lot of sense. I thought about suggesting to increase the uncharged version's safety on shield, but part of what I like about the concept of this move is actually this baby just recklessly hurling itself at you. And hey, the move is slow, its animation looks powerful, you take stealth damage. I think that should hurt a lot more. So yeah, it actually increased the knockback on uncharged Skull Bash. Falco has an up throw and a back throw where he chucks you into the air and then fires a laser at you. Cool concept, I like the idea behind the throws, but you can DI them so that the laser stops connecting entirely and it doesn't even take that long before it starts happening, and I think that's so dumb. You can see it on back throw too, so I would just completely change it so this is not a thing anymore. You can't DI until the laser actually hits you. Cheating a little bit, it's 2 moves instead of 1, but the mechanic behind it's exactly the same. And you may say, well, that would give Falco kill throws, and he's not supposed to have kill throws, he's not balanced around it, and they're not even good kill throws. I don't think that's a big deal at all. If you wanted to get into more of a proper rework discussion, then yeah, I think you could make some other changes to the throws as well, but even not doing any of that, I still think they're better than what we have now. For Marth, pretty simple change. I would make this kill. They gave all the Fire Emblem characters this brand new forward throw animation that looks very forceful, and they didn't really do all that much with it. I think Marth being this kind of ultra specific high precision character, if he ever wants to kill anyone, that's totally fair to give him one more just solid backup kill option. I'm not saying it would even need to be an amazing kill throw, just something. And in Smash 4, he was a much better character who was much better at sealing stocks, and he had a killing up throw, the best kind of kill throw, and it actually felt perfectly at home there too. You could bring that back to some of his old glory in Ultimate too, but why not take advantage of the new animation? And it also just seems so fitting for a character who cares this much about space. The biggest issue people usually have with Lucina is that she's just a little bit on the boring side. You know, all her combos are like a couple hits at most, mostly just plays a very simple, solid, straightforward neutral and kills you with a stray hit. Now, there's nothing wrong with having simple sword fighters in the game. I think that's actually pretty important, but we could do a little bit more with her. You can make dash attack a proper combo tool, reduces knockback, and have it send you up rather than out. I think that's a pretty reasonable option, honestly. It would make her at least a little bit more interesting, and it would turn an almost entirely useless move into actually a pretty good one. Something I think that would make her actually even more interesting and separate her a little bit more from Marth, though. So this kind of stuff here is so close to working and being really cool, but if you look at the combo counter, it's not actually a thing. If the CPU were fighting back, you'd always get out of this. So for Lucina, I would decrease the ending lag of the first hit of her Dancing Blade, which would actually accomplish a couple things. It would make it a more versatile move on the ground. Right now, it is one of your combo finishers, but it's just not worth using in neutral, and again, it would make her combo game a lot more interesting and a lot more separate from Marth. Obviously, you would have to be pretty careful with the tuning on this. I don't want you to be able to just loop heavyweights across the entire stage, so put the frame data at a value that works with the hit stun the move creates, so that at higher percents you can get a few loops and then move scaling starts making it not true again. Youngling's bombs have this weird multi-hit property where they send your opponent on different trajectories, and it can be very, very difficult to tell which side they're going to be on in the middle of the explosion, and that can easily be the difference between a stock or not a stock. In a controlled environment like this, it's not the worst thing in the world to dictate which side you want them to pop out on, but in a more hectic fight, realistically, a lot of the time, essentially, it is just guesswork. I think that's a completely unnecessary bit of functionality. Toon Link's bombs don't work like this because they're not multi-hits. I would just have every launcher send your opponent straight up. I thought Ganondorf was going to be a difficult choice, but he actually turned out to be one of the easiest for me. Why does Flame Choke still put you into free fall? Almost no side specials do this anymore. Why is the super heavyweight who can canonically fly the character they've arguably decided to stick the worst recovery in the entire game onto? And no, I haven't forgotten about Little Mac, I haven't forgotten about Dr. Mario. Ganondorf has no mix-up options whatsoever, and his airspeed and the travel distance on both his 2 recovery moves are not good at all. His recovery is so bad that he functionally does not feel like a heavyweight. He dies much earlier than characters much lighter than him. That's not okay. Flame Choke should not put you into free fall in 2022. For Mewtwo, I'm gonna make what's probably one of the biggest power upgrade suggestions in this video, and it's actually similar to Ganondorf. I would say let him act out a teleport. Don't have it put him into free fall. This is something that's shown up in fan games before, and it does a lot to increase the creativity of the character. In Ultimate, I think it would certainly be very good, but I don't think it would be overpowered by any means. And it would A, again, increase creative potential, and B, improve Mewtwo's disadvantage state, which I think is unjustifiably bad right now. Yes, he's blatantly designed to be a glass cannon character, but I think his weight alone is more than enough to imply that. I don't think struggling to land this much should be tacked on top. Relatively simple suggestion for Roy. I'd like some increased kill power on Blazer, sort of like what he had back in Smash 4. I'm not saying it needs to be insanely strong. It's not a bad move by any means as is, but going for this kind of stuff, I missed this. This was a lot of fun back in Smash 4, and the fact that your opponent basically always survives that now, that makes me kind of sad. Chrome's really difficult because he's essentially based around the concept of most moves I have are amazing except for recovery, and that's kind of the main balancing factor on him, and I can't rework the recovery. I think that's outside the scope of this video. One change I can suggest for him is to substantially decrease the ending lag on his down smash, which would separate him a bit more from Roy and give you at least some incentive to use it, because right now, this thing is just bad. You're never going to pull this out for essentially any circumstance, so at least between the two of them, one of them can have a bit more justification to use it. For Mr. Game & Watch, I decreased the landing leg of back air. It's very unusually unsafe for a back air on shield for reasons that I don't think are totally justified. It's not a very good combo move or kill move. It's a cool move, and it definitely gets used off stage because he doesn't really have anything else to replace it, but on stage, if you decreased its ending leg, that would let you get some basic bridge combos at earlier percents, nothing too fancy. It'd make it a little more reasonable to throw it into neutral. Again, I don't think that's by any means unfair. I like the turtle. Let's see more of the turtle. The first thing I do whenever I pick up a new sword character is try out their forward air, and in Meta Knight's case, this one is just not cutting it for me. It's kind of pathetic, actually. It's so small, the animation's ugly, it's got too much cooldown on it. It's just overall very, very disappointing as far as sword aerials go. There are a couple combo applications that does drag down into down smash, or you've got stuff like first hit into neutral air, that's a thing, and then at very early percents you can sometimes confirm the entire move into a dash attack, which is obviously something that Meta Knight wants, so there are options there. You can improve the drag down potential, you can improve the window that it leads into dash attack. I would do a change that I think benefits all of those, plus just makes him a more versatile all-around character. Decrease its startup. Considering how inferior it is to so many other sword forwarders, it's weird to see it this slow. Pit and Dark Pit, my ideal declone versions of them would be Pit more of a ground-based character, Dark Pit more of an air-based character. I think that matches their specializations in the Kid Icarus series more. So very simple, straightforward changes. I would make Pit a little bit faster on the ground, and I would make Dark Pit a bit faster in the air. Seriously, Samus has a pretty terrible grab, and I would say in Smash 4, for example, that was way more justified because she got a ton of reward off it. Down throw into ladder combos were a huge staple of the character, and she could kill you extremely early off it. This just feels like it should be a combo throw to me, and the fact that it's not is very unintuitive, and it makes the move feel like a nerfed move, you know what I mean? It doesn't feel natural. But at the same time, getting her to do more tech chases with her forward throw and stuff like that, I think that's pretty reasonable, even if I still don't like having that weird version of down throw on her kit. So instead I make it one of the rare down throw kill throws. It looks powerful enough in the animation where I could see it being a kill throw, and I think she's allowed to have a good reward of some kind off grab. This thing here, that seems so specialized, right? Wario's down smash is one of the single worst moves in the game. And honestly, I'm totally fine with that because it's an exaggerated version of Mario and Luigi's down smash, and it's him trying way too hard and completely screwing up. So I'm actually going to make the exact same suggestion as for Donkey Kong, and I'm going to cut down on the ending leg of jab 2 a lot so it turns into a combo tool. Exact same justification. It looks like this should be a launcher, and it's very slow. In this case, though, it's even worse because this is frame 8, which for a jab is just insane. His down tilt is frame 5. So right now, jab is useless in essentially every way, and you could make it have at least some purpose behind it. Keep it slow, okay, the big fists are funny, it looks like it should be a slow move. Okay, Snake, so hear me out here. The change I want on Snake more than anything else is to make his box taunt faster. How great would it be if doing this kind of stuff was actually some kind of viable strategy? Now, there are other attacking taunts, yes. Those are pretty much all just purely jokes, and they're good jokes, but the thing about Snake in particular is the box. That's actually a pretty important part of the Metal Gear series. You see it show up a lot, and it would be cool to see it actually properly folded into his moveset. Now, you might say, oh, risk-free edge guarding, something that doesn't even matter if you miss. That's not an especially healthy thing to have in the game, and you know what? In most cases, I would agree with you. I don't think that's especially healthy game design, but Snake has this, so who cares if he's got a better box too? The Nikita would still be far better. I just like the box to be good enough where every now and then it is genuinely worth considering, as opposed to right now where it's 100% a joke. Again, I like joke taunts and I understand their purpose and I'm happy that they exist, but this is a bit of a different case than the rest of them. For Ike, of course it's forward air's kill power. If you followed the channel for any amount of time, were you expecting me to say something else here? Brawl Ike's forward air is still personally my favorite Smash move of all time, and while Smash 4 Ike's forward air didn't feel nearly as good to hit, it was still really satisfying. This just isn't doing it for me. The animation looks way more powerful than it actually is. Again, this is one of those moves that feels like a nerfed move, and from a balance perspective, I think having the heavyweight sword fighter have powerful sword fighter aerials is completely warranted. Yes, characters are allowed to change, and a lot of the changes they made to Ike actually make him way more viable than he's ever been, and some of them are really nice and feel very canonically faithful. That's great. But without a really strong forward air, he just still feels like an incomplete character to me. I'm making the same request for all 3 Pokemon. If you hold the button down, you can go backwards in the transformation rather than forwards, letting you truly transform at will. I think the system right now where you have to use a set rotation just feels a little bit unnecessary to me, and yes, there would be some potential technical issues with this. I don't actually know how this is programmed. Maybe they need to only have 1 Pokemon loaded in at a time in the background. Maybe having either Pokemon available at any time would create issues, but going on the assumption that they wouldn't, or that they could reasonably find a way around those issues if they really wanted to implement it in a patch, I think that's a pretty cool change. For Diddy, I would reduce the early hits of the Rocket Barrel boost so that you could use it more reliably out of shield or out of combos, because it's a cool move. Going for just these crazy kamikaze options feels very appropriate for the personality Diddy's been given in Ultimate, as is. You can do that occasionally at early percents especially. Yeah, there are times when it will link into both hits, but I'd like that to be way more reliable. I'm not really sure what Lucas's dash attack is actually supposed to do. It's slow to start up. He's got other moves that outrange it, a fair amount of other moves that outrange it, which are also much safer. Does it combo? No. Does it kill? Kind of, but only at the very sweet spot, and it's not even that great at it. So I'd increase the speed on that so it's at least vaguely competing with something like forward air, because why are you ever throwing this out when you can just do that? Makes no sense. Sonic's a character where they gave him a couple, like, oppressively good moves that people don't like to see spammed constantly, and then a lot of the rest of his kit is kind of mediocre, so you guarantee that you're only going to see the same handful of moves for most of the match. So I definitely like to buff one of those weaker moves, and I think the one that makes the most sense is Down Tilt, which right now is a really mediocre combo tool. So I think having it send way more vertically so that it actually properly comboed into his aerials, that accomplishes a couple things. It diversifies the moves he uses in neutral, and it also encourages more aggressive use of his ground speed. I kind of get why they decided not to give him a lot of great ground moves. I think they're worried about this exact kind of scenario of him just running up and like bopping you with something really good. But as is, the alternative right now is, okay, well, if none of my ground moves are good, I'm just gonna charge spin dash and spin charge over and over again. I think letting him make more proper offensive use of his actual speed is probably healthier overall. For King Dedede, I would turn back throw into a proper kill throw. The animation for it is definitely there. This looks like a powerful throw. It makes sense, I think, for a character as powerful as King Dedede to have a kill throw of some kind, and he's also very much based around ledge trapping anyways. You can make a case for forward throw for the same reason. It also actually looks pretty strong, but that's competing with Inhale more. But I still like the idea of a character like Dedede having a move that just goes, yeah, if I smartly position myself at the ledge and catch you off guard, you're just dead. It is just piling onto his strengths rather than shoring up one of his weaknesses, and I think it's totally justifiable to fix some of Dedede's weaknesses, but I like the way he works. There aren't a whole lot of characters that are so focused around the ledge trapping phase, and I think it would make a pretty big difference too. I know Olamar's neutral air isn't supposed to be an amazing move, none of his non-Pikmin moves are, but it's so pathetic at the moment that I think you can definitely do something about that. I would make it send way more horizontally. I can't fix the hitboxes, that's the rule on this video. Its hitboxes, for the record, are really bad, but at the very least, if you do connect them all, it should have some semblance of an edge guarding function, and making that particular change also means that the multi-hit drag down combo stuff wouldn't be impacted. So there are a couple changes you could very reasonably ask for Lucario from older games. You could ask for his weight to be reverted back to more what it used to be, and you could ask for his aura to scale up more. I think those are both totally fine changes. A couple decent arguments against them apart from the fact that I'm trying to avoid too many reversions to older games. His weight being low, yes, it does make sense for the aura mechanic, but canonically, Lucario is not a particularly big or heavy Pokemon. He's actually surprisingly small, so the whole being a pseudo-heavyweight thing really doesn't make a whole lot of sense apart from the fact that they're trying to make some kind of internal synergy with a character smash design. And I also think having the aura normalized a little bit more in Ultimate is probably the healthier direction to take the character, honestly. So both fine choices, but I'm gonna make a different suggestion that's really bugged me for a long time. This thing here, this jab combo, it's frame 5, which is slow for a jab. It's incredibly unsafe by jab standards. It can be on the inconsistent side, and observe, maximum aura on Lucario with rage turned on, 150% on Pac-Man, and he lives. I have no idea why they made this move as weak as they did. It looks like it should be a really strong jab based on the animation and by its frame data, so I would say scale it up way more so that with high aura and decent percent on your opponent, this is like the best killing jab in the game. Yeah, it sends at a very vertical angle. Oh, there's the inconsistency. Yeah, fine. Let Lucario kill off the top at high auras. He's allowed to have a lot of kill power at high auras. I think it's one of the cooler looking jab animations in the game, but it's like they've gone out of their way to make it just as crappy as they possibly can. Oh god, he's still not dead. One move that's always stood out a little bit to me with Rob is his forward smash. Sure, that's really strong, but if you connect with the sour spot, which, by the way, to my eyes, that looks like a sweet spot. It looks like, you know, the tip of a spear. I understand that's up for personal interpretation, but regardless, It's bafflingly weak. So I'd up the power on that a little bit. It's more just fixing a visual inconsistency than anything else. I don't think the move looks like it should work like that. And it's not like Rob really needs a lot of buffs in other areas anyways, or that forward smash would suddenly become an absolutely insane move. For Toon Link, I thought about saying his forward smash. It's the one brand new move that they gave him in Ultimate compared to his previous incarnations. It's still got good kill power, but it's actually worse than his old one still. But one of the other moves, they changed the properties of, at least his back air. They turned it into a combo tool. I'd like to see that emphasized more because as is, DI breaks a lot of the potentially cool stuff you can do. So I would say actually reduce the knockback growth on that so that this kind of stuff actually connects reliably for longer, because this is very cool and it's also very different than his usual just like throwing bombs and running around kind of game plan. And if you want to connect a bomb into back air and start your game plan that way, that's cool. I think that's totally on the table. And he can already do bombs into combo stuff anyways, so I don't think it's actually that big a deal. Certainly would not break the character, and it's again just something a little bit different he can do from the other links. For Wolf, I thought about saying that if he connects the sweet spot of Wolf Flash, he gets to act out of it the same way that he does in something like Project Plus, the fan game. But this is kind of an insane kill option that goes against most of the rest of what Wolf is sort of designed to do, which I think is totally fine to have on his kit, but I do think you should have to pay a price for it. Losing your stock as well seems totally fair doing a stock trade. So I'm just going to say the same thing I did for Fox. You should be able to jump cancel out of Shine again. Wolf could probably get a little bit more out of it from a combo perspective. He has much better airspeed and he knocks them up rather than forward, but honestly, what, he gets a forward air or he gets a neutral air? That seems okay to me. At higher percents, he might be able to get more reliable Wolf Flash combos out of it, but not really that different than what he can already get with forward air or neutral air. As I said with Fox, I don't want to make too many of these just like, oh, I wish we were playing melee characters right now sorts of changes, but this one is just so cool, and I think restricting it like this is really unnecessary. I know Wolf can get a little bit out of this already. There are some things that are true combos or at least close to it, and I appreciate that, but you could definitely do more. I don't like the change they made to Villager's Jab. I think it was way cooler in Smash 4 where it had combo applications, but what's done is done. Down tilt is kind of a puzzling move, though. It is a kill move, yes, but it's not very safe. It's not very quick. He essentially has moves that outclass every single thing it does. The one thing it does have going for it is fairly decent shield pushback, which I actually think matches the animation pretty well, so I'd increase that even further so it gives the move an actual valid point. It's a relatively safe on shield kill move, but there's some setup time behind it. Yeah, that does mean it's competing with Bowling Ball, which already kind of fills this role, but it would be a much quicker option. Kills off the top instead of the side, so there are definitely some reasons to opt for either one of them, and I'm not going to make that suggestion for Isabelle, so it's another move that will be differentiated between them. Isabelle and Villager are already pretty good in that department, but I'm always up for more diversity between clones or semi-clones. Mega Man's dash attack is another one of these moves that I just don't really see the purpose of. It barely does its job as a burst movement tool at all. He basically runs the same speed as this thing comes out, and its hitbox barely even goes in front of his body, and look at that trajectory it sends you on. So it's certainly not going to be a combo tool, and then it's not even close to being a kill move either. And even if Mega Man does want something like this, I think his down tilt does a much better job. It doesn't kill either, but it low profiles you. It's got some invincibility on it. Mega Man isn't exactly lacking in kill power, so I would turn this into a combo tool. I think that would be more interesting. I would have it send you more upwards and considerably less distance. Simple stuff like Metal Blade into dash attack into regrab, and then you could maybe follow up from there. That would be cool. Wii Fit Trainer's Hula Hoop isn't half bad as a recovery move actually, but as an actual attack, it's completely useless. I'd turn it into a kill move, and it doesn't need to be an incredible kill move, and I'd probably have it kill off the side rather than the top so you couldn't do stuff like this really early with deep breathing. Again, I wouldn't want to make it super strong because it does have pretty persistent hitboxes, so I wouldn't want to make it just too brain dead of an edge guarding tool, and I wouldn't even make the hits necessarily connect into each other more. I would only make the final hit the killing hit. But right now, there's not even really a reason that the move has hitboxes on it. It's so borderline and so useless. I think giving her something to do with it could be fun. Smash 4 Rosalina definitely had her flaws, but I think she overall still worked a lot better than she does in Ultimate, and part of the reason for that is how much better it felt to maneuver Luma across the stage. One change that I think you can definitely revert back is having the Luma jab kill off the top again, which it doesn't even come close to anymore. Yeah, it's a good option, but it's not an insanely overpowered option, and the best way to make use of it is to have Luma go out and do it. You can bring Luma in, yeah, sure, and you can still get the killing jabs, but you're not really taking full advantage of the puppeteering nature of the character at that point. Precise positioning of Luma largely through jab was a major part of Rosalina's spacing game in Smash 4, and yes, it was powerful, but it wasn't insanely powerful, and even with that, she'd be a noticeably worse character in Ultimate. And it was interesting. I know Rosalina's a frustrating character for a lot of people. Personally, she's always been one of my favorite character designs in the game, and it already has plenty of ways to kill you, including off the top, that aren't even that much more committal, so it's really not that big a deal. Little Mac in the Punch-Out games is all about anticipating your opponent's attack and then countering it. They did that a little bit here with stuff like the armored forward smashes, but I think you can definitely push it further, and I would do that with the slip counter. On the ground only, I would decrease its ending lag, and I would also increase its start up to frame 3 compared to frame 5 where it is right now, which would put it on par with Incineroar's Revenge. Because I think if there's any character in the game who should be spamming counter as much as possible, Little Mac does actually make sense. For Greninja, I'd like to say something to do with Shadow Sneak. It's a very cool move, and I think it's underutilized as it is, but There's not really a change I can think of here that would be enough by itself. I think it needs to be reworked a little bit more significantly outside the scope of this video. So I'm just going to say something nice and simple and say that forward tilt could be safer on shield. He's this evasive, slippery ninja style character. I think being able to go no, that seems okay. Me Brawler has a couple throws that are kind of, sort of kill throws. Down throw, well, I mean, it looks like it'll get there eventually. Forward throw, I think this should actually kill. Yeah, but it's still not by any means a good kill throw, so I would just increase the knockback growth on forward throw a little bit more so that it's at least a passable kill throw. Right now, it's really not very good at all. He's called Me Brawler. The fact that he doesn't have a great kill throw right now actually sort of stands out to me as a bit weird. I really expected him to when I first tried to play him, and they're sort of moving in that direction. They just haven't fully committed yet, and they've given him a command grab, but it doesn't kill either. And again, it feels just slightly out of place for him not to have something like that, so okay, just commit already. For the Miis, I usually prefer to make changes that aren't based on special moves just because it always makes an impact, but for me, Sword Fighter in particular, this thing here, the Blurring Blade, what is this doing here? This is in the neutral special slot, and the other neutral specials you can choose from are two fantastic projectiles. So why you'd ever give those up for a move that's frame 17 on startup, and if you choose the frame 17 option, is not even very good at killing. You need to charge it up even more for that, and is extremely unsafe on shield to top that off? The answer is you wouldn't. The only real benefit it has here is it's got a decently sized hitbox and it gives you a little bit of a stalling option in the air. Those are not even close to competitive. So I would say decrease the startup of it a little bit and also give it massively less ending lag. And what that would do is a couple things. A, it'd make it at least vaguely competitive with the projectiles, and B, it would also improve some of the weakness of his forward air. Me Sword Fighter's forward air isn't a horrible move, it's got some utility, but by the standards of sword characters' forward airs, it's very slow, very short range, doesn't kill, it's just extremely underwhelming. Why this isn't based on Marths instead is something I'll never understand. But if you choose Blurring Blade, you're giving up an excellent projectile, which is obviously a valuable addition to Sword Fighter's kit, but you could survive because Chakram also exists, and it also means you're allowed to give those up in favor of acting more like a pure sword fighter. You get an alternate neutral air that has some cool utility behind it and is much bigger and stronger. So as far as I can see, that's a relatively simple change. You're just tweaking a few numbers, but it actually accomplishes quite a bit. Back to the basics for Me Gunner, I would make it so that the kickback she gets from her forward air, that's increased. Forward air mobility tricks is some of the cooler things Me Gunner does in my opinion. I think opening that up more would make the character more creative and interesting. Yeah, it does potentially incentivize them to run away even more, but they're already going to the edge of the stage constantly. What else is going to happen? Palutena's wing smash attacks are some of the more eye-catching moves on her kit, but you really don't see them that much. They're not very practical, so I would make it so that forward smash has way more shield pushback than it does right now. Would definitely make it a lot more reasonable to throw out. I'm not necessarily going to say it makes it totally safe, but I'm also not necessarily going to say that's going to be the goal here. And it works on a couple levels because another distinctive aspect of this move is that it has a win box. You can see I'm not actually connecting with Marth, but he still gets pushed. So if they want to make a flapping wings generate wind kind of concept, cool, I like that. Let's also apply it to shields. Pac-Man was a very hard one for me. His design is so weird overall. One change that I did come up with though, lowering the forward throw angle so that he can get tech chases off of it. Doing this kind of stuff, you know, simple forward throws into fruit, that's fine. It's not like he doesn't get stuff off of grabs anyways. I'm still not 100% sure about this, but it's really hard to think of something to give Pac-Man that doesn't involve reworking him more. I'm not saying he doesn't have weaknesses of any kind, but you know, he's got a set of great zoning tools and he's got more really good close quarters tools, so he's kind of set in that regard. The 11 sword forward smash on Robin, I would significantly increase the safety of that on shield. Yes, it's a good smash attack. It's very strong and it's got a lingering hitbox on it and it's got a fairly large hitbox too. But this is one of those animations that looks like it should be safe to me. You know, you're crackling electricity on your opponent's shield, and electricity has some safety on shield connotations in Smash, and this is one of your big payoffs for having 11 sword available, and it's not always available. It's a limited time resource, so I don't want it to just be a good smash attack. I want it to be an excellent smash attack. Shulk's frame data is kind of crap, but that's okay because look at the size of the giant sword he's swinging around everywhere. Except for his jab. They made a conscious effort for Shulk not to pull his sword out here, and yet it's still frame 5, one of the slower jabs in the game. I get not wanting to give a character like this a good close quarters game, but having a passable functional jab is not a good close quarters game. It's a passable functional close quarters game. I'd increase that to like frame 3 just so it's more in line with a typical short-ranged close quarters jab. Its power level is totally fine. It's at the level right now where without Smash Art, it doesn't kill at all, and with Smash Art, it's like okay. For Bowser Jr., I would significantly decrease the ending lag on the Clown Cannon. I want this to be like a traditional 2D fighting game projectile where you can throw it out and then walk along behind it, but you can see it's just, even with your burst movement tool, it's too slow. So it just has so little use right now. You like knock your opponent off stage and then run back and set this up at the ledge so it might fall on them or something like that, but even then, you've got other setup you'd like to be doing more often than not there. It's a pretty iconic Mario move. It took a long time for them to get it into Smash, and it's been 2 games now, and it's been pretty disappointing both times. It's better now than it was in Smash 4, but it's still one of the worst projectiles in the entire game. Duck Hunt's a pretty blatant zoning character, and one of the things that zoners have going for them is the trio of throw a projectile, jump over the projectile, anti-air the jump. And this up tilt seems to be more or less aligned with that because it has a really hard time hitting grounded characters, but it's like a bare bones, barely functional anti-air. It doesn't really combo, doesn't really kill. It is disjointed and relatively quick, so it performs the minimum functions of an anti-air, but really nothing more than that. I'd reduce his knockback so comboed into his up air for way longer. That seems totally in line for Duck Hunt. Ryu's the more defensive, neutral focused character, and Ken's the more offensive focused of the two, so I would emphasize that a little bit more. There was a patch that added carry canceling for the Street Fighter characters, specifically for down smash. You can now cancel down smash into special moves the same as you can do with some of their other stuff. So what I would do for Ryu in particular, I would let him do that with up smash as well. Let's get some up smashes into Shoryukens going on here. This is a cool move that doesn't show up a whole lot in Ultimate as is, and giving you more incentive to look for it, which also plays again into that nice zoning triangle as another anti-air option. Gotta give him just a pinch more depth there. And then for Ken, one of the more dramatic and immediately noticeable differences between him and Ryu is his back throw. It gets your opponent off stage a lot more effectively than Ryu's does, which is nice, but getting them into the corner in Smash is not nearly as effective, I'd say, as getting them into the corner in Street Fighter, so I think this should be allowed to be at least a passable kill throw. Not fantastic, not the best kill throw in the game by any means. It does get you to the corner very quickly, but it does play into Ken's much more close quarters focused design, and it's one of his more recognizable moves. For Cloud, I would just reduce the ending lag on his base blade beam a little bit. I think this projectile is totally fair. I like that it actually sees some amount of use in Ultimate compared to Smash 4, where it really was not what you wanted to be doing most of the time. But hey, what can I say? I like projectile sword fighters. I think making this thing a little bit better would still not make it an especially oppressive projectile, and it would add, again, a little bit more depth to Cloud's neutral game. One of the most distinctive and interesting moves that Corrin has to set her apart from the other Fire Emblem characters is the Dragon Fang shot, and it's not good. This thing's a really slow projectile with a lot of end lag, and it does absolutely nothing despite that. At 100%, it does have just enough stun time if you don't fully charge the bite to get a kill, but at this point you're using it as a bad melee attack because you need to get right in their face. It's barely going to accomplish anything at all as an actual projectile, a slight bit of stage control. Underwhelming for a move that slow. I just decreased the startup time of the uncharged version a little bit so it was at least a passable neutral projectile. You can already combo into it, so it's not like it's opening up any brand new territory there, and this is just kind of sad. The charged version is also very bad and you're never going to hit anyone with it, but fixing this thing definitely makes the bigger difference overall, and again, it's one of the main things that Corrin has to make her feel unique as a Fire Emblem character. Bayonetta is another difficult one. On the one hand, I want to say that this thing here, the bullet arts, they're underutilized. They put so much effort into allowing you to hold all of her moves out, and it's just not really practical to go for. At the same time, what am I going to say? Okay, yeah, run away more and hit people with indiscriminate hitboxes. That doesn't seem like especially healthy character design. Bayonetta's moveset is mostly based around comboing people off stage and then looking for stray hits, so something that I think would actually tie into that is just making her forward throw a little bit stronger. I know it's not the first time I've suggested a kill throw change, and it may actually be getting a little bit redundant, I admit, but I think she's actually one of the characters where it makes most sense out of anyone to do it. Her combos give her great positioning, and she needs to actually take advantage of that positioning to finish people off. So the forward throw at the ledge thing, that actually does play into that pretty well. Inkling's very much an edge-guarding character. They're very good at getting opponents off stage and going out there to finish them off and then still making it back because of how good their recovery is. So it's a weird choice to me that they have such a terrible Danner. It barely spikes. It only spikes for something like 2 frames, and it's really slow. It feels actually weirdly slow for the animation, so I would speed this up a decent amount. Ridley's got several terrible moves that you could definitely make cases for. His skewer, well, I mean, that one's kind of supposed to be a gimmick. His Danner is definitely unjustifiably bad, but something that I think makes more of a practical difference and works better from sort of a lower canon kind of perspective. Look, if you're going to take a character who can literally fly in his home series and make his air movement this limited and his recovery this limited, you've got up, you've got forward, you've got backwards, and forward and backwards send you at different angles which you can't control. And then you've got down, and that's it. That's all you have for a recovery. It at the very least shouldn't be this slow. I can add more angles, I'd like to, but that's outside the scope of something you could expect to show up in a patch, but I would definitely say drastically reduce the startup time on this by a lot. Whether we're talking about balance or we're talking about canon, it just makes way too much sense. The Belmonts have a number of weaknesses that I think are well suited to their home series. Their movement comes over from Castlevania. They feel like very faithful translations, meaning they control like tar, which is a huge handicap in Smash, so I think that does keep them in line. Now, One issue that they do have tacked on top of that too, though, is recovery for some reason. I don't think that's particularly justified. I could boost recoveries on both of them. Richter's the one who originated the uppercut, so I could say that one goes a lot higher. And then Simon maybe do a big increase of the detection window for his up air. That is improving both their recoveries, which I think is fair, but if Richter gets a higher uppercut, he also gets more kill power off the top with it. But Simon only gets the recovery benefit, so Richter, okay, he can have the higher uppercut. Simon, I'm gonna make a fairly radical change. I'm gonna put a reflector on this thing. It's easy enough to do in a patch. You just tack a reflector property onto the hitboxes and it makes it have at least some vague semblance of a use, which right now it certainly does not have. I know it's not really making it a lot better in a way that it works in Castlevania, but it is at least making it better, and most of the more faithful Simon-esque specific buffs are all like improving his zoning game more, which I don't really want to do. The Cranarang is a cool projectile, not an especially good one though. I think it's totally fine for it to have some startup time behind it. It shouldn't be the kind of thing you can just throw without any thought, and being this slow lumbering thing is in line for King K. Rool, but what I would say is that it should have less ending lag so you can jump out of it faster. I think that'd make a pretty big difference to K. Rool's neutral. Coming up with a buff for Isabelle that didn't just make her more annoying and was still significant was honestly kind of difficult, but one thing, this is almost a kill confirm. It's getting there, but a lot of the time they just start creeping outside that window a little bit. So I think making the up tilt have less knockback so that you could actually confirm it into the turnips, at least for a time, that seems totally fair. And again, you've got a little bit of that zoner anti-air triangle going on. It's giving her something more to do, something different than what she usually does and something different than what Villager does. And it seems in line with a lot of other characters' kill confirms. It's fine. Incineroar's a rough one, like I talked about in the last episode. He's so specialized, all his moves are really good, and then his mobility is trash, and you can't really improve the mobility. That's the whole point of him. One thing that sticks out though, in among all this really nice frame data for a heavyweight, you got this slow down air, and he's clearly taking some design inspiration from Ganondorf, so this is a down air that I want to see coming out a lot, and he's one of these styling characters, so I want to see it even more. So yeah, let's decrease the startup on his down air. This kind of stuff is really cool, and it's a buff to his close quarters game that I think actually feels pretty fair, even on a character who's already loaded with good close quarters tools. The fact that after you've started tilting yourself forward in this move, you can't tilt yourself back up, yeah, that feels a little bit unintuitive, and from a pure balance perspective, I'm not sure it's necessary, but if we lived in a world where Piranha Plants were spamming this a lot more, would that necessarily be a better world? I'm not so sure. Piranha Plant's kind of a weird moveset, kind of a hodgepodge, but there is one aspect of the character that I really like, and that's the don't land on me idea, which comes directly from how it functions in Mario, so I'd like to play into that a little bit more. I think the move I'm going to go with is Up Smash. It's already one of Piranha Plant's better moves. Frame 12 for the scoop hitbox, I think, and frame 16 for the upper one. That's not bad, but we can do better. I think there should be a genuinely great up smash, a genuinely fantastic up smash. So I'd speed that up by exactly 4 frames, because then it comes out 1 frame faster than Mario's. For Joker, I would add a bit of an increase to the knockback on the aerial grappling hook. Doesn't need to be a ton. It is a very long-ranged move, very low-risk move overall, but at least the occasional off-the-top kill with this would be kind of cool. I don't think it would be overpowered by any means, but it would be stylish. And it's already a very difficult move to line up, and it's very possible to react to, so I think that's all perfectly fair and will give just a little bit more style to Joker's kit. I know the whole concept behind Hero is, oh, look at what a slow, sluggish sword fighter I am, but then I got all these magic spells to help me out. But back air though? He barely even has a back air. Barely even has a back air. But yeah, it's okay for this back air to be slower than other sword fighter back airs, and it is pretty strong, but it's not even outrageously strong. It just feels like they went a bit too far here. We don't need to give it a ton more speed, but I think a little bit's fine. A move that Banjo-Kazooie players complain about a fair amount for, I think, justifiable reasons is up air. It's got some stuff going for it. It's not too slow. It's pretty big and disjointed. You can get some combos out of it, especially the landing version, but they tend to be pretty specific and finicky and not super practical. The much more practical way you use this move is rising, and in that sense, it's not very good. It's not especially reliable to connect with, and it doesn't really give you much. Again, we're not fixing hitboxes, but I would at the very least increase its damage and decrease its knockback, so there was a band where you do like up air into up air into up air, and it would be a true thing. Not even a big deal because there isn't like a combo throw into it. That's fake. That's not a real thing. Your opponent can always get out of it. And the damage output, it does what? 8.8 right now, so let's say even knock that up to like 10 or 11. A low percent combo that does 30 damage, that's very par for the course in Ultimate. Power Wave is a very cool, distinct, interesting projectile in Ultimate, and at least a cool neutral interactions, but I wish it led to them a bit more often. Ultimate is just way more aerial focused than Terry's home game, so a projectile that entirely hits on the ground is just a little bit underwhelming in that context. They did account for that to a certain extent. I like the fact that he's got a air specific version of it. You can use it for edge guarding and you can use it to stall your recovery. That's all good stuff, but I think for its more intended neutral purpose, we can push things a little bit further. I would increase the speed of this, both in terms of making it come out faster and allowing allowing Terry to act out of it a little bit earlier, because I think this is a really cool skill testing move for both players. I'd like to see it come out more often. Okay, look, I know the fail knot has some interesting utility. I like that you can cancel out of it either on the ground or in the air. That's all cool. I know Byleth makes very good use of fail knot elsewhere, but I've been waiting so long for a bow fighter Fire Emblem character, and for one to finally come along that also represents the entire weapon triangle, and then realizing that the actual bow shot itself is this weak and easy to dodge, and even the best player in the world playing this character doesn't hit it consistently. It's not what I wanted. I'm not saying it's especially warranted from a balance perspective to speed this up. From a personal perspective, him with a faster arrow would be like my dream character. As is, it's kind of disappointing for me, and it's honestly a pretty substantial part of the reason I don't play Byleth anymore, because I'm always just reminded of my perfect character that they came close to. Heavyweight projectile sword fighter. Bulk him up a little bit, make the arrow better, and maybe tone down some other moves, whatever you need to do to make that balanced, and my god, he would be my main in a heartbeat. Oh well, should go without saying that I'm not doing anything to buff the arms moves on Min Min. What I would do instead is actually just increase the speed of down air. She's a very acrobatic feeling character overall, so it would make sense from that perspective, and she's got one of the weaker stall and falls in the game, a category of move that's already very weak, and she has a very bad disadvantage state. This wouldn't magically give her a good disadvantage state, and I don't think she should have a good disadvantage state, but it would help a justifiable amount and in a way that I think feels appropriate for the character. Yep, that's right, we're buffing Steve, and for all this character does, there are a couple things we can work on here. One move you don't see come out a whole lot is his dash attack. Just compared to all his other broken tools, it doesn't really do all that much. And one tool set that you don't really see come out a whole lot is the gold set. It's good, it gives you better frame data, it's the only set that does that, but you're also giving up your ability to use powered rail carts, and by the time you've mined gold, you've almost mined diamond, so you might as well just wait it out. So I'm gonna say we sort of address two things at the same time here. If you have gold tools, dash attack is frame 8 right now. It goes to frame 4, literally half the frame data. It emphasizes two sort of weaker aspects of his kit, two areas that I think could be explored more, and it does so in a way that doesn't contribute to all the other stuff he does. If you dash attack someone, it knocks them away. There aren't really many follow-ups unless you've positioned blocks or a mine cart or something like that on the stage, which in that case, okay, fair enough, you've done creative stuff with Steve. So I think making dash attack like the signature move of gold, or at least one of the certainly much better ones than you'll see it anywhere else, something like that's worth exploring. Base Sephiroth is a cool but not especially great character. One Wing Sephiroth is a much better character. I think even with the One Wing form, he's still not the best character in the game though, and he doesn't really have it all that often because of how light he is. I like the way it's utilized, it's very flavorful. It's like, okay, you've beaten up the first form, now you're facing the real true form of the final boss. It feels like a JRPG, but he just gets cheated out of being able to use the One Wing form so much because you get it and then you die right away because he's so light. I tried to come up with some more clever ways to get around this, but honestly, I think the answer is just to reduce the average threshold for the damage you need to take to get One Wing form by maybe 10-15%, something in that range. It means there are less situations where your opponent just completely manages to bypass fighting the final boss, and it also means that Sephiroth himself will have a longer window to make use of the new One Wing abilities in. For Pyra, last time I'm gonna say it, I promise, but just make forward throw a kill throw. She's the character you bring out to finish stocks. It looks like a kill throw, you light your opponent on fire. It's 100% fair. Everything Pyra has is lethal, because that's her job. Mythra I had more trouble with because her job's to play neutral and to get your combos earlier on, and she's already so good at those. So I would say put her in the elusive one frame jab club. Right now, it's literally only Little Mac and Zero Suit Samus have that. She's attacking you with her hand like Shulk, and it's not really what you want to be doing with Mythra anyway, so it's not bad from a balance perspective, and it kind of sends a message, right? It's like, oh, look at this lightning fast character. Because he has a huge moveset, and he does use a decent amount of it, but realistically, a lot of it's just used in the context of Electric Wind God Fist kill confirms. So I'd like to emphasize one of his lesser used moves, and I think this one here, the jump sidekick. This is interesting, his up back tilt. I'd increase his damage quite a bit, which yes, would make it a very high damaging normal, but this is Kazuya we're talking about. That's nothing. That's not what he wants to be doing at all. The main reason I'd want to do that is to make it very safe on shield, because I want this to be one of the best disengagement tools in the game. The Tekken series is all about spatial control on the ground, and to Smash's credit, it did capture some of that for sure. But giving Kazuya extra tools to play with space, specifically retreating space, he does obviously have this kind of stuff going forward. It'd make him just slightly more interesting, and it wouldn't break him, and it wouldn't contribute to any of the broken things he's already doing, and it would play into the Tekken series just a little bit. I know technically he's not on the ground while he's doing this move, but it is a grounded move. Sora's a very distinctive feeling floaty character, and I think that's totally fine, but they've pushed it to the point where he essentially has no ground neutral whatsoever. They clearly always want you in the air with him. I think we can reel that back just a little bit and still make him feel like Sora. One move that really stands out on Sora compared to most sword fighters is down tilt. It's still a very good combo move with decent range on it, so that's all fine, but it's -16 on shield, which by the standards of sword fighter down tilts is so horrific that they're clearly making a conscious effort to say, no, we don't don't want Sora to have a ground game. I don't think that's totally necessary. For perspective, Chroms is -5, Lucina's is -8, Mithra's is -10, Ice is -13. Now, Sora can potentially get the most reward off these. You can kill confirm off of it pretty comfortably, but it's also shorter and slower than most of them, so from a neutral perspective, it still gives him essentially nothing. So I would say maybe make it a little bit more in the, I don't know, -12-ish kind of range. Not the best. It's good enough. It does have enough reward that it shouldn't be like the best move on shield in the game by any respect, but get it to the point where if you're spacing yourself well and you're just landing the very tip of the move on shield, you shouldn't get punished too hard for it. And hey, it may be a ground move for Sora, but it still leads into air stuff. It's actually one of his best launchers, so making it a little bit more viable to use, I think that seems totally fine. And that's the video for today. Let me know what you thought. Alright, thanks for watching everyone. Another very long subjective list. Curious to hear your thoughts on this one. Likes and comments are a huge factor that YouTube uses to gauge whether a video should be passed around to more people, so if you think this one deserves it, much appreciated. Another video above, video from my main channel MockRock below, and patrons, YouTube members, and Twitch subs get perks like early videos, Discord access, and the music used in the ad for this video. Later, people.